36 days, that's how long Donald Trump has been president-elect. He's been really busy selecting a cabinet, talking to world leaders, following up on campaign promises, usually on social media. And now, our first CNN poll since Election Day shows most people are happy with what they're seeing from the incoming commander-in-chief. CNN's David Chalian is at the Magic Wall to break down the numbers. David.
Dana, you're all right. There's no doubt that the president is going to enter office with a little bit of a honeymoon. Take a look here. Donald Trump has a 55% approval rating. That's not normally a support level we see for him as it relates to his handling of the transition right now. 45% disapprove. Compare this to 8 years ago when Donald Trump first won the presidency in November 16. At this point, he was at 46% approval of his handling of the transition. That went even lower in January of 17 before he took office to 40%. Today, he stands at 55%. How does that compare, though, to other presidents? Well, he's still at the bottom of the pack here. So he's doing better when compared to himself, but that 55% is lower than Bill Clinton, who had a 62% approval of the transition, George W. Bush at 65, Joe Biden 4 years ago at 66%, and Barack Obama at 79% approval of his transition. We also asked, what are your expectations for how Trump will be as president? A majority of Americans, 54%, say they expect him to do a good job as president. And we asked specifically, do you have confidence in all of these areas about how Trump will perform and his ability to handle it? And once again, as we saw throughout the campaign, the economy is issue number one of his strength. 65%, 2/3 of Americans in this poll say they have some or a lot of confidence in Trump's ability to manage and handle the economy as president. And you see Russia, Ukraine followed there, then immigration, and his leadership skills, his what he intends to use his power for, whether that'll be responsibly not, a bit lower. But again, all of this is majority support. So that is where things stand right now.
And, you know, obviously a big hallmark, not in a good way, of the election for Joe Biden was that people feel not great about the way the country is going. How has that changed, if at all, now that Donald Trump is president-elect?
So we've talked a lot in the aftermath of the election, sort of why did the outcome exist the way it did, and a large part of that analysis has been because the country told us repeatedly throughout the last 2 years they thought it was dramatically on the wrong track. And so we ask again, how are things going in the country today? It's still more negative than positive, but it's now down to 61% who say that things are going badly, 38% who say things are going well. This is actually, as you can see here, a bit rosier of a sentiment of how people are feeling about how things are going in the country than had existed. In fact, that 38% who say things are going well, that is the best number in CNN polling in 3 years. We haven't seen it that high since December of 2021. And then, well, we did this, Dana, but I just want to show you here. We also asked folks, does Donald Trump's appointments, should they be about experience and qualifications, or should it be about being loyal to his positions and just doing what he is looking for? Look at this. 3-1, 75% say best experience and qualifications is what he should be doing when putting people into positions. 25% say just people who will support his positions, which may explain this finding in our poll about Musk and Ramaswamy and about them leading the government, the Department of Government Efficiency. You see an even split here. This is the politics of America here. 50% say they disapprove of Musk and Ramaswamy in that role. 49% say they approve, Dana.
Really, really interesting, all of it. Thank you so much for bringing it to us, David. And here at the table are some additional amazing reporters: Nia Malika Henderson of Bloomberg and CNN, Semaphor's Dave Weigel, and CNN's very own Phil Mattingly. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Wednesday? Happy Wednesday?
Yes.
All day. Nia, first to you, your sort of assessment of what these numbers tell us post-election.
Yeah, listen, Donald Trump has something of a honeymoon. The funny line from David's presentation there was that he's essentially doing well for Donald Trump, right? He's still lagging the other presidents, but I'm sure he's looking at these numbers and also probably relaying some of these rosier numbers to folks in the Senate who might be getting a little weak in the knees about some of these cabinet officials, right? It looks like Americans are behind him. We'll see how long this lasts. We've covered enough presidencies between us to know that there is a honeymoon, and then there is the reality of governing. But it is also just fascinating that Americans are still fairly sour on the state of the country. It's better than it was, but only 38% or so think that the country is, going in the right direction. That is a challenge for Donald Trump. We'll see if he's able to improve those numbers.
And let's go back to the last point that David was making about the question about whether or not it is more important to choose people with qualifications or who are completely loyal to Donald Trump, and break it down by party. Republicans answer that question 78%, Democrats 77%, Independents 71%. Now, I have to say that when I first looked at it, I was looking at the numbers you don't see there, which is, almost, 22% of Republicans say, no, loyalty is more important than being qualified. But I was convinced that that big number, 78%, saying of Trump's fellow Republicans saying, you really need to find people who know what they're doing. That's more important than being loyal to you, is a big number. And I get that, too.
Yeah, look, in an ideal world, you can find both in a country of 300 million plus people. I say that somewhat in jest, but also because I actually think in large part, not necessarily the kind of shiny object nominees we've seen in some of the cabinet level positions. If you go a layer underneath some of those nominees, you're finding people who are both very loyal to the president-elect and who also have a lot of bureaucratic experience, a lot of know-how, and a very serious intent for what they're going to do when they take those positions, assuming they are Senate confirmed. And that, in and of itself, is extraordinarily different than what we saw in 2016. We constantly talk about what's different from then to now. This, when you're talking about Russ Vought, OMB director, when you're talking about kind of up and down the line of deputy positions of people in government agencies that we all know about, but normal people don't because they have real lives and don't care about budget policy necessarily, God bless you. They are serious people who know what they're doing, and they are deeply, deeply loyal to both the president and the president's agenda that he's laid out to this point.
And Dave, the point that the other David made about comparing Donald Trump to himself, since we're in a relatively, definitely a unique situation in modern times where you have the second term coming after somebody else was in the presidency for 4 years. So let's look at the question of the approval of Trump's handling of the transition, rather, back in 2016 versus now. Republicans, it's almost full support. Independents is up by 6 percentage points, and Democrats up by 7. Now, it's not a high number, but it's higher than it was 8 years ago.
Well, the Democratic messaging reaction is very important here because they are not acting like they need to be in a position of mass resistance at any level. Their leadership is not saying that. Joe Biden's not treating him like Pinochet overthrowing Allende. He's inviting him to the White House. The candidates for DNC chair are not saying that. They're saying their problems in the party. Talking to Democratic governors this weekend at their conference, I was struck. They were not saying we're going to do mass resistance in this way. We're not going to talk to him. They were talking about how they reached out to congratulate him, or the case of Phil Murphy in New Jersey, how he invited Trump to a ribbon cutting, which is one of those projects that Democrats are worried about Trump will take credit for. Murphy's answer was, well, he's the president. Of course I'm going to bring him in here. So the tone I'm getting from Democrats is that they need to wait for events. Once the people are implemented, they might not know who these cabinet nominees are or who Russ Vought is. Once there is a budget, once something affects them, they're looking more down the line to the first set of tax cuts, like the turning point in 2017 being the effort to repeal the ACA. And that's not how they were at this point 8 years ago. They were already marching and they were already ready to resist.